What happens when you plug a 2,000-year-old Greek philosopher directly into a modern military AI supercomputer?
I mean, it sounds like the setup to a strange joke.
Yeah, exactly. But today we're walking straight into this completely bizarre, impossible debate.
Right.
So imagine a virtual space where these sun-bleached, majestic marble columns of ancient Greek architecture, the Parthenon at the absolute height of its glory.
Yeah.
Imagine those are physically interwoven with the humming, ultra-modern server racks of a massive data center.
It's just a wild visual.
It really is. You've got these blinking blue lights reflecting off ancient marble statues.
Yeah.
And the source material we are unpacking today actually calls this surreal landscape the Garden of Ideas.
The Garden of Ideas.
Yeah, and standing right in the middle of it are two figures who just absolutely shouldn't exist in the same universe.
Definitely. So on one side, stepping out from those ancient columns, is Plato, the foundational thinker of Western logic, the author of the Republic. He represents rational order, absolute moral truth, and what he famously termed the idea of the good.
Okay, and on the other side?
Stepping out from the humming data center to meet him is Alex Karp.
Right, the modern-day CEO of Palantir Technologies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Karp is presented here not just as a tech executive, but actually as a philosophy PhD.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and a strategist who is hyper-focused on the existential threats facing the modern world.
So we have the architect of ancient idealism basically going toe-to-toe with the architect of modern, data-driven pragmatism.
It's a heavy clash.
It really is. And our goal for this deep dive is to explore this exact clash. We are going to use this fictional, highly conceptual source text to understand a massive, real-world question.
Right.
Like, what is the actual path forward for a nation's strength in the 21st century? And why does this specific dialogue argue that relentlessly investing in America's technological future is an absolute moral necessity?
Well, and just to pause here for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because we are talking about politically charged themes here, right? Military dominance, the survival of Western civilization, and Plato literally trashing the concept of democracy.
Right, which is wild to read.
It is. So we just want to make it absolutely clear to you, listening, we aren't taking sides here.
No, definitely not.
We aren't endorsing Karp's modern warfare tech or Plato's ancient politics. Our job is just to impartially unpack the fascinating arguments presented in the original source text. We're just the tour guides here.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the tension starts immediately, right?
Oh yeah, right out of the gate.
Over a fundamental disagreement about the very nature of human thought in the modern era.
Right, so Plato observes Karp's world, and he just raises this deeply skeptical eyebrow. He tells Karp that he's heard a terrifying rumor about the 21st century.
Which is?
That machines have started thinking for humans.
Wow.
And to Plato, this is the ultimate surrender. If you hand over human reason to a piece of metal, you essentially surrender the soul.
But Karp doesn't miss a beat here.
No, he instantly pushes back on Plato's premise. But he does it with a really subtle distinction. Karp argues that machines do not think for us. They simply help us prioritize how to think.
Right, which is a brilliant reframing of the modern dilemma of information overload.
Exactly. Karp isn't arguing that an algorithm is doing the philosophizing for us.
Right.
He is pointing out that the modern world produces such a staggering volume of data, just a deafening amount of noise, that without a machine to filter it, human reason is entirely paralyzed.
Just freeze up.
Yeah, we cannot even begin to think deeply about a problem because we are drowning in a sea of irrelevant information.
Wait, let me stop you right there, because I don't entirely buy Karp's defense here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think it's worth challenging, because prioritizing is a form of thinking for us, isn't it?
I mean, in a way, yeah.
Right. If an algorithm decides which 10 emails I see first out of 10,000, or like which intelligence reports actually land on a general's desk, that machine is dictating the boundaries of human thought. You can call it prioritizing all you want, but the person or the machine curating the menu is ultimately deciding what you eat.
That is the exact vulnerability in Karp's argument, and it is something that text wrestles with constantly.
It has to.
Yeah, the act of filtering is inherently an act of judgment. But Karp's counter to that is basically a matter of scale.
What do you mean?
He is essentially saying to Plato, look, you lived in an era where you could sit on a rock, observe a relatively static society, and contemplate a single geometric shape for a week.
Right.
But I operate in a world where 1 billion data points, like troop movements, financial transactions, satellite imagery, they are hitting my desk every single sense.
It's just a totally different reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Karp argues, if I don't use a machine to tell me which problem threatens our existence right now, we won't survive long enough to have a philosophical debate in the first place.
Wow. And that survival aspect brings us to the first major visual clash in the text.
Right, the hoplites.
Yeah, we see these ancient Greek hoplite soldiers with their shields locked together in a phalanx formation, and that visual overlaps with a modern American aircraft carrier strike group.
It's such a striking comparison.
It really is.
Yeah.
And Plato uses this to bring up the concept of national power. He references the guardians from his book, The Republic.
Right.
For Plato, a guardian, the protector of the state, must possess courage, sure, but infinitely more importantly, they must possess wisdom.
Wisdom is key for him.
Yeah, Plato tells Karp that having a massive aircraft carrier or a massive data center is completely useless and actually incredibly dangerous if those tools do not serve justice.
Right. Unchecked power without moral wisdom always leads to tyranny. That's Plato's core belief.
Exactly. So how does Karp respond to that? Does he just say morality doesn't matter anymore?
No, surprisingly, he validates Plato's moral framework completely. He doesn't say morality is dead, but he adds this sharp, really pragmatic twist.
Okay.
Karp argues that in today's world, justice only exists if you actually have the power to exercise it and defend it. His core argument in the text is that moral superiority will not stop an adversary armed with superior artificial intelligence.
Right.
You can sit in your perfect republic and contemplate the idea of the good all day long. But if a hostile nation decides to wipe you out with an autonomous drone swarm...
Your philosophy dies with you.
Exactly.
This brings up a really crucial distinction Plato makes between true wisdom and what the Greeks called techne, right?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
because being a tech CEO, Karp is essentially the ultimate master of techne.
He really is.
Yeah.
And for the listener, techne is where we get the word technology, and it essentially translates to craft or technical skill.
Right, the know-how.
Yeah. To Plato, being an expert at building a ship or building an algorithm that perfectly targets an enemy is just techne. It is a mechanical skill. You know how to do something incredibly well. But just because you have a technical skill to build a weapon or process 1 trillion data points does not mean you possess actual wisdom.
Because wisdom is the why.
Exactly. Wisdom is knowing why you should build it, whether it's just to use it, and what the ultimate moral end of that tool is.
Think about the Manhattan Project.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. That is the ultimate historical example of this clash. We had the greatest collection of techne, of raw technical and scientific skill in human history gathered in the desert to build the atomic bomb.
Yeah, they knew exactly how to split the atom.
But the moment the Trinity test went off, Oppenheimer and the others were immediately struck with a crisis of wisdom. They had the power, but they were terrified they lacked the moral framework to handle what they had just created.
Right.
Plato is looking at Karp's AI supercomputers and seeing the exact same dynamic. He's asking, you have the techne, but do you have the wisdom?
And the source text brings this conflict to life by invoking one of the most famous analogies in all of human history.
Oh, Plato's allegory of the cave.
Yes.
I love this analogy. Explain the mechanics of the cave for the listener, because it's so foundational to understanding everything else in this debate.
Okay, so Plato imagined a scenario where humans are prisoners, chained in a dark cave since birth.
Right. They can't move.
Yeah, they are chained in such a way that they can only face a blank wall. Behind them, higher up, a fire is burning. And between the fire and the prisoners, people are walking along a raised walkway, holding up various objects.
Like statues of animals, plants, everyday items.
Exactly, like a twisted puppet show.
Right.
The prisoners only see the shadows of those objects cast onto the wall in front of them. And because they have never seen anything else in their entire lives, they believe those two-dimensional shadows are the absolute ultimate reality.
They don't know they're looking at a projection.
Right. The philosopher, in Plato's allegory, is the one who manages to break their chains, turn around, realize the fire is causing the shadows, and eventually walk all the way out of the cave into the real world.
Where they see the sun.
Yes. Above ground, they're temporarily blinded, but eventually their eyes adjust, and they see the real world illuminated by the actual sun. And to Plato, the sun represents the idea of the good.
The ultimate objective truth that makes all other reality understandable.
Exactly.
So in the context of this bizarre meeting in the Garden of Ideas, Plato turns to Karp and asks a devastating question.
Right.
He looks at Karp's massive data centers, his predictive algorithms, and his intelligence software, and he asks, are you actually leading humanity out of the cave in the light of truth? Or does your technology just make the shadows on the wall look so high definition and so believable that we never even try to turn around?
It is a brilliant challenge. He's accusing Karp of building the ultimate shadow-generating machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Karp's response to this is where I think the text gets highly controversial and where I personally want to seriously push back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Karp claims that advanced technology does bring humans out of the cave. And his reasoning is that massive data aggregation provides, quote, unbiased truth.
Right.
I struggle with this immensely.
Why is that?
Palantir and modern AI are processing massive amounts of data generated by humans, right?
Yeah.
And humans are inherently flawed, biased, emotional, and irrational. If you take 1 billion biased data points and feed them into a machine, aren't you just organizing the shadows on the cave wall into a slightly neater pile?
That's a fair point.
How can Karp mathematically or philosophically claim that data equals unbiased truth?
Well, it is the central tension of their first exchange. And Karp's defense relies on the law of large numbers and the concept of signal-to-noise ratio.
Okay, unpack that.
Karp is making an extrapolation. In his view, if a single human reports an event, that is a shadow. It is clouded by their perspective, their bias, their limited vision.
Right.
But if you have 1 billion data points, let's say satellite imagery, global supply chain invoices, telecommunications metadata, and open source reporting.
Just a mountain of information.
Exactly. And you use a powerful enough algorithm to mathematically triangulate an event, Karp argues that the sheer volume of data strips away individual human emotion. Yeah, he thinks the bias becomes the noise, and the mathematical synthesis of all that data represents the signal. It represents a structural reality that no single human could ever see on their own. That, to him, is the light outside the cave.
Okay, I see the logic, but it assumes the algorithm itself doesn't have a bias in how it weighs that data.
Right.
If the machine decides that satellite imagery is inherently more valuable than human ground reporting, the machine is injecting a bias.
Yes, the programmer's bias.
Right. But even if we grant Karp his premise, even if we say this supercomputer actually does synthesize the pure, blinding truth of reality, the text immediately points out a new problem.
Which is?
The light outside the cave is blinding.
Right, and this is where Karp introduces the absolute necessity of what he calls the brain.
The brain.
Yeah. If data brings us out of the cave, the sheer volume of that unvarnished truth is so overwhelming that it would paralyze us. We wouldn't be able to act.
We just stare at it.
Exactly. The technology, therefore, isn't just a giant hard drive storing data. It acts as a cognitive filter. It is a mechanism that dims the blinding light of total reality just enough so that human leaders can actually look at it, comprehend it, and make a strategic decision.
Let's bring this down to a practical level for you, the listener.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Think about your own daily information diet. When you pull out your phone and look at the news or your social media feeds or the financial markets, are you looking at shadows manipulated by the fire of engagement algorithms?
No.
Right. Or are you using specific, curated tools to find actionable truth? Karp is arguing this on a geopolitical scale. He is saying a nation without advanced AI is a prisoner chained in the dark, forced to believe whatever shadows its adversaries project onto the wall via information warfare or deception.
And that terrifying image, a nation chained in the dark, it bridges us directly to the next massive philosophical hurdle in the script. Let's assume Karp is completely right. Immense technological power is required to filter the noise, find the truth, and protect the state.
Right, assuming that's true.
The immediate next question is, what kind of society do we trust to build, own, and deploy this godlike technology?
Oh, boy.
And that leads directly into Plato's deep historical hatred of the very system Karp is defending.
Which is democracy.
Yes.
Democracy.
The visuals in the video shift entirely here, right? We leave the ancient hoplites behind and move to a chaotic, vibrant montage of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, intercut with the flashing, frantic red and green numbers of the NASDAQ stock exchange.
Right, and Karp points to this chaotic energy and insists that this free market democratic system is exactly why the world must invest in America's future. He sees an unparalleled economic engine.
But Plato looks at that exact same montage and just recoils in horror.
He hates it.
He hates it. He uses his classic historical critique from the Republic. See, Plato lived through the decline of Athens. He watched a democratic system vote to execute his mentor, Socrates.
Wow, yeah. So it's personal. It's very personal. So his view of democracy is not the idealized modern version we hold today. He views democracy as a system in severe terminal decline.
Unpack that. Why did Plato think democracy was fundamentally doomed?
Because he argued that in a democracy, the citizens' desires are completely uncontrolled. The guiding principle becomes absolute, unrestrained liberty, which sounds great until it turns into a society ruled entirely by appetite rather than reason.
People want what they want right now.
Exactly. It becomes a culture of immediate gratification.
The text actually has Plato calling it a nation ruled by fickle masses and greedy merchants.
Right.
He argues that this total lack of discipline and moral center inevitably leads to wealth concentrating at the top, creating an oligarchy. And then, because the society is so chaotic and unequal, the masses will eventually become desperate for order. They will gleefully elect a charismatic strongman who promises to fulfill their unchecked desires and restore order.
And that strong man eventually becomes a tyrant.
Right. So Plato looks at the NASDAQ, looks at the chaotic innovation of Silicon Valley, and says to Karp, why in the world would anyone invest their future in a system that is mathematically designed to self-destruct into tyranny?
And Karp's response to this is arguably the most compelling moment in the entire script.
Really?
Yeah, because he doesn't dismiss Plato's fears. He concedes that the threat of the mob, the danger of greedy merchants, the chaos of unchecked appetite, all of Plato's fears are entirely valid today.
Okay.
But Karp reveals what he considers the hidden superpower of the American democratic system. He identifies it as the system's self-correction ability and its unyielding desire for innovation.
This is a wild pivot.
It really is.
Karp completely flips Plato's entire critique upside down. Plato looks at the noise, the greed, the intense arguments, the messy reality of a free market democracy, and sees a catastrophic bug in the software.
Right.
But Karp looks at that exact same chaos and argues it is the core feature. The chaos is the engine.
Karp introduces a concept here we can call civilizational competitiveness. He compares the messy democratic system to closed authoritarian regimes.
Okay, how so?
Well, an authoritarian system might look incredibly orderly and rational on the surface, which Plato, favoring order, might initially respect.
Right, the trains run on time, the citizens are aligned, there is no messy public debate.
Exactly. But Karp argues that authoritarian order is brittle. It cannot adapt to novel shocks. The messy democratic system, however, attracts global geniuses precisely because it is free and chaotic. It attracts fearless capital that is willing to take massive risks.
Let's use an analogy to really visualize what Karp is claiming here.
Yeah, please.
Think about comparing an authoritarian nation and a democratic nation to two different types of businesses.
Okay.
The authoritarian nation is an old legacy corporation. Everyone wears a suit. There is a strict hierarchy. No one speaks out of turn in a meeting. It looks incredibly professional and stable.
Very rigid.
Right. But the democratic nation is an incredibly messy, chaotic startup company. Desks are covered in empty coffee cups and loose wires. There are no dress codes. People are screaming at each other in the hallways over contrasting ideas.
Total chaos.
Total chaos. There is a constant lingering threat that the whole company might run out of money and go bankrupt next week.
Right.
Plato walks into that startup, looks at the lack of strict rules, and assumes it's going to collapse by Friday. But Karp looks at that exact same messy room and says, this is the only environment on planet Earth where a group of humans can actually invent the light bulb or the microchip or advanced AI.
That analogy perfectly captures the text's argument. Karp believes that the synergy between innovative tech companies creating massive wealth and that advanced technology then cycling back to strengthen national defense creates a virtuous cycle.
Right.
To Karp, this is the modern definition of a just state. It is a state that generates enough power through its own internal freedom to protect that very freedom from external threats.
But let's dig into that idea of self-correction for a second. Because if a society has to self-correct, it implies it is constantly going off course.
It does.
Based on the script, democracy is constantly making mistakes. It is constantly facing failure. Karp makes a very specific point that capital, investment money, must flow into places that do not fear failure.
Right, because failure in an authoritarian legacy corporation is often fatal.
Exactly.
It is punished severely, which means no one takes risks, which means innovation stagnates.
Right.
But failure in Karp's democratic startup analogy is treated simply as data. It is a necessary, albeit painful, step toward the next major innovation.
That's a learning opportunity.
Exactly. The fickle masses might elect a terrible leader, or the greedy merchants might cause a market crash. But the system allows them to course correct in the next election or the next market cycle.
Right.
This dynamic, painful resilience is what Karp argues makes the messy system infinitely stronger over the long term than the rigid one.
Okay, so let's follow Karp's logic. We have this chaotic, messy, self-correcting democratic engine. It is generating unparalleled wealth and world-altering technology. But what is the actual end goal?
Right. What's it all for?
Exactly. What is the product we are buying with all this wealth? Because if democracy is just generating money for the sake of money, Plato's warning about greed destroying the state seems inevitable.
Definitely.
Plato demands that this wealth go toward educating the soul of the nation, while Karp argues it must go into artificial intelligence. This seems like an unbridgeable gap.
Well, in this phase of the dialogue, Plato lays down a very strict moral mandate. He asserts that if a nation is generating vast wealth for its dynamic markets, the only justifiable use of that wealth is to educate the citizen souls and establish just laws.
Right.
Plato warns that without an educated soul, wealth is a poison. It makes the state lazy, arrogant, decadent, and ultimately vulnerable to a hungrier, more disciplined adversary.
I hear the phrase educating the soul, and it sounds incredibly poetic, but also practically meaningless in a modern context.
It does sound a bit vague today.
Right. How does Karp, a man who deals in petabytes of hard data, respond to the demand to educate a soul?
Surprisingly, he agrees completely.
Really?
Yeah, Karp states that education is paramount to the survival of the state. But he argues that in the modern era, achieving that education, creating a citizenry capable of moral judgment, is utterly impossible without technological innovation.
Uh, and this is where Karp makes a massive, heavy claim in the script.
Yes, he does.
He says that investing in American AI is not just about corporate profit. It's not about making the NASDAQ line go up. He argues it is about building a collective intelligence to help democracies navigate the modern flood of information.
And here we are seeing the synthesis of Plato's ancient concept of education with Karp's modern concept of collective intelligence.
How so?
Well, Plato viewed education as an internal, highly personal moral pursuit. Imagine a master and a student walking through an olive grove, quietly discussing the nature of virtue.
Very peaceful.
Very peaceful. But Karp is arguing that the modern equivalent of the olive grove is our digital infrastructure. In an era of infinite weaponized information, technology is the necessary infrastructure for any moral pursuit.
Right. You can't even have the conversation if you don't know what's real.
Exactly. You cannot have an educated, moral citizenry if those citizens cannot discern a legitimate news report from a state-sponsored deepfake or objective reality from a hostile algorithmic psyop.
This applies directly to everyone listening right now.
Yes, it does.
Think about how much effort it takes you to simply stay informed on a basic level today. Imagine if you completely turned off every single algorithm, every spam filter, every search engine ranking, and you just received raw, chronologically unfiltered data from the entire internet simultaneously.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a nightmare.
Right. You wouldn't be free from the algorithm. You would be entirely paralyzed. You would be trapped in an ocean of noise. Karp is arguing that on a national civilizational scale, AI is the new public school system for our collective decision-making. We require the technology simply to teach us how to see the baseline of reality clearly.
And to underline this necessity, the script presents a terrifying dichotomy.
What is it?
Karp points out that adversarial authoritarian regimes are actively using AI to cement their dictatorships. They use vast data collection to monitor, control, oppress, and socially engineer their populations.
Right.
Therefore, he argues, America must build AI that does the opposite, AI that protects freedom.
Let's play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
What does AI that protects freedom actually look like? Because when I hear about a military-grade AI processing all available data to protect me, my mind immediately jumps to a benevolent big brother.
Yeah, surveillance.
Exactly.
Okay.
It sounds like mass surveillance disguised as a security blanket. How does the text justify this oxymoron?
Well, the logic of the dialogue suggests that an AI that protects freedom acts as an immune system against deception.
An immune system.
Yeah, it looks like a tool that helps a democratic nation make correct, timely judgments amidst a flood of deceptive information. Rather than an AI designed to blind the population to the truth or restrict their access to it, it is an AI that empowers the state's leaders, and by extension the citizens, to see the geopolitical board clearly.
Okay, I see.
It provides the clarity needed for Plato's mechanism of self-correction to actually function. Because you can't self-correct if you don't know you've been driven off a cliff.
Fair enough, but this heavy reliance on AI to build a collective intelligence and act as an immune system leads us straight into an incredibly dark philosophical corner.
It really does.
Plato, with his obsession with order and hierarchy, spots the flaw immediately. If we are using the machine to filter the truth, to identify our enemies, to essentially educate the soul of the state,
Who is really in charge?
exactly, the human or the machine.
And this brings us to the climax of the script. And the visual representation here is striking. The video shifts to show complex Palantir data visualizations, like intricate nodes, networks, glowing lines of global information.
Right.
But layered directly over these modern digital networks are Plato's geometric patterns, the perfect circles and triangles that represent his eternal forms and his unyielding rational order.
It's the ultimate collision.
Yeah.
Plato looks at this incredibly powerful software and realizes that Karp's algorithm is essentially auditioning for the role of the guardian of the state. It is identifying the threats, allocating the resources, managing the security.
It's doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
Right. So Plato asks the killer question, the one that defines the entire AI age. Can an algorithm understand the idea of the good?
Before we answer that, we need to clarify what Plato means by the idea of the good, because it's not just a synonym for being nice or acting ethically.
Right, it's deeper than that.
Much deeper. For Plato, the good is the highest ultimate reality. It is the source of all truth and all existence. Just as the physical sun gives light that allows our eyes to see physical objects, the idea of the good gives truth that allows our minds to understand concepts like justice, beauty, and courage.
Wow.
Without the good, nothing has meaning. So Plato is asking, can a machine made of silicon and electricity comprehend the fundamental moral meaning of the universe?
And if it can't?
Because if it only understands mathematical efficiency, correlation, and force, it runs the risk of becoming a soulless tyrant. It will make perfectly logical, highly efficient decisions that are morally horrific.
Exactly. A machine only knows what it is optimizing for.
Right.
If you program an AI and tell it to optimize for global peace, the most statistically efficient way for the machine to achieve absolute permanent peace is to eliminate all humans.
Because we're the problem.
Exactly, because humans are the sole source of conflict. To the machine, that is a perfectly logical solution. That is Plato's nightmare.
And surprisingly, Karp does not brush this fear off. He drocks the tech bro bravado entirely. The script has him explicitly revealing that this exact fear is what keeps him up at night.
Really?
Yeah, he states unequivocally that technology is just a tool. It absolutely cannot judge values, it has no soul, and it cannot comprehend the idea of the good.
Which is fascinating, because Karp's solution isn't to say, don't worry, we will eventually program morality into the code.
No, he recognizes that as impossible. Instead, Karp insists that Palantir, and AI in general, must be kept strictly under the absolute institutional control of the democratic state.
Okay.
The human ruler, what Karp frames as the modern democratic equivalent of Plato's philosopher king, must be the one to make the final judgments.
So what is the actual role of the technology if it isn't making the decisions? Karp describes it merely as the mind's eye.
The mind's eye.
Yeah, it provides transparent, mathematically accurate, perfectly organized information to the human ruler.
The phrase mind's eye is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It implies that technology provides the sight, but the human soul must provide the vision.
Right. Sight versus vision.
Sight is merely the mechanical processing of photons, or in this case, data. Vision is the deep understanding of where you are going and why it matters. Karp is attempting to address Plato's warning. Tyranny begins the moment technology tries to become human reason itself, rather than just assisting it.
I want to expand on an analogy here because I think it perfectly crystallizes this dynamic.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you are driving a highly advanced vehicle at night through a terrible, blinding storm.
Okay.
The technology, the AI, is the dashboard, the GPS navigation, the collision avoidance radar, and the ultra-bright headlights. That technology is the mind's eye. It tells you exactly where the physical road is, where the deer is about to jump out, and how fast your engine is running.
It allows you to survive the storm.
Exactly. But you, the human, are the driver. You are the only entity in that car that actually knows the destination. You know why you are driving through a dangerous storm at 2 in the morning. Maybe you're rushing to the hospital.
Right.
You hold the context. You hold the idea of the good. If you surrender control and let the GPS decide the destination based solely on its programmed optimization, say maximum fuel efficiency.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. It might drive you perfectly safely and efficiently into the middle of an empty parking lot, completely ignoring the fact that you needed to get to the emergency room.
Wow.
That perfectly efficient, totally blind arrival in the parking lot is Plato's soulless tyrant.
That analogy hits the core of the debate perfectly. The GPS has no concept of home or urgency or suffering. It only knows coordinates and algorithms.
Exactly.
Karp emphasizes in the text that the United States is far from perfect. It is plagued by its greedy merchants, its fickle masses, its endless chaotic noise. But, he argues, it is the only geopolitical superpower with the dynamic democratic drive to constantly correct its soul. In the context of your analogy, the U.S. is the only driver on the global road who is constantly checking the map, arguing with the passengers, and asking, wait, are we still going the right way? Technology, Karp argues, is just the accelerator pedal for this journey.
But let's look at the terrifying alternative the text implies. What happens if you press that accelerator pedal all the way to the floor on a vehicle that isn't trying to correct its soul?
That's a scary thought.
What if an authoritarian regime, one that strictly punishes self-correction and debate, gets the best AI, the fastest car, and the brightest headlights?
Right?
According to the logic of the script, that is a regime driving at 1,000 miles an hour straight into the dark. And worse, they are using those high-beam headlights not to find the way home, but to deliberately blind everyone else on the road.
Which brings us to Karp's ultimate justification. He argues that investing relentlessly in American AI isn't just a good economic strategy, it is an existential imperative.
We have to do it.
The Democratic driver, despite all their flaws and messy arguments, simply must have the fastest car and the most perceptive radar, because the alternative is surrendering the global road to a driver who optimizes only for total control.
As our deep dive into this bizarre garden nears its end, the two towering intellects have to reach some kind of synthesis.
They do.
They have battled over the definition of power, the chaotic nature of democracy, and the delicate, high-stakes tightrope walk between human wisdom and artificial intelligence. They are walking together as the sun sets over this impossible landscape.
And Plato offers a final, solemn warning to Karp. He tells the modern CEO that he must constantly, vigilantly monitor his technology to ensure it always serves the idea of the good.
A heavy responsibility.
Very heavy. Plato reiterates the core belief of his ancient philosophy. True hegemony, lasting power, and actual security come from the soul's wisdom, not from sheer wealth or brute computational force.
And Karp absorbs this warning, and he offers the final concluding thesis of the entire dialogue. It's a synthesis of everything they've discussed. He says, soulless technology is violence, and technologyless soul is powerlessness.
It is a masterfully constructed philosophical equation. Let's break it down into its two halves.
Okay, the first half.
Soulless technology is violence. This perfectly encapsulates Plato's ultimate nightmare. It is pure force operating without justice. It is the algorithm optimizing for destruction or engagement or efficiency, completely devoid of any moral framework.
Right.
It is the highly advanced car driving efficiently into a crowd of people because it wasn't programmed to value human life.
And the second half of the equation, technologyless soul, is powerlessness. This encapsulates Karp's ultimate modern nightmare.
Right.
This is the morally superior, perfectly just, highly educated society that gets utterly annihilated in an afternoon by a more ruthless adversary simply because the adversary had better AI weapons.
Exactly.
It is having the perfect, noble destination in your heart, but possessing no vehicle to actually get you there.
The narrator of the source video then steps in to deliver the final verdict. The future of America, and by extension the defense of the Western democratic model, relies on maintaining this exact, excruciatingly delicate balance.
Right.
It requires a continuous virtuous cycle. Relentless, unapologetic technological innovation paired with continuous, rigorous moral reflection.
You might be listening to this right now thinking, well, this was a wild intellectual exercise, but I'm not running a nation, I'm not a philosophy PhD, and I certainly don't own a military AI company.
Fair point.
But this fundamental tension applies directly to you. Think about your own life, your career, the tools you use every day. Having great tools, whether that's access to an AI assistant, a massive professional network, or just a significant amount of money, without a moral compass makes you, frankly, an agent of chaos.
Yeah, you become dangerous.
You become dangerous. But on the flip side, having a pristine moral compass, a desire to do good in the world, and a perfectly educated soul, but refusing to learn how to use the modern tools required to actually make an impact.
That leaves you entirely ineffective.
Exactly. You become powerless to enact your goodness.
That is a profound personal application of the text. And it explains exactly why the video's narrator ends with a direct prompt to the audience. As the logos of Palantir and Plato's Republic overlap on the screen, the narrator asks the viewer, What do you think?
Why end an incredibly dense philosophical debate with an open-ended question to the audience?
Because the continuous moral reflection that the text demands cannot be outsourced to a machine.
Right.
It relies entirely on the citizens of the democracy, the very same fickle masses and greedy merchants Plato worried about, actively participating in the conversation.
Mm.
It requires the citizens to constantly evaluate the tools, to challenge the leaders, and to demand that the idea of the good remains the ultimate destination.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath.
Yeah, that was a lot.
We took a wild, highly conceptual hypothetical debate, a literal clash of ancient idealism and modern pragmatism, and we unpacked a masterclass on the balance of power. We explored why the inherent messy chaos of democracy might actually be its greatest strength, and we looked at the terrifying tightrope walk between human wisdom and artificial intelligence.
And the core takeaway, synthesizing both Plato and Karp, is clear. True civilizational strength isn't just having the sharpest sword or the smartest, most data-hungry AI.
Right.
True strength is possessing the chaotic democratic framework, the self-correcting engine, and the unyielding moral fortitude to swing that sword justly. It is the union of the soul and the machine.
But before we officially let you go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought.
Yeah.
Something to chew on that builds entirely on the logic of the text we just explored, but takes it one step further into the dark. Karp argues that the philosopher king of today is the human democratic institution using AI as its mind's eye to make wise choices. The AI gathers and filters the light so the human can see the truth and steer the car. But if the AI is the absolute filter, if it is processing billions of data points and curating them into a single manageable dashboard,
Yeah.
doesn't the AI inherently decide which truths the mind's eye gets to see? If the machine controls a menu of reality and the human can only make decisions based on that menu, is the human really the driver anymore?
Oh, man.
Or is it impossible to keep the tool from quietly, subtly becoming the tyrant? Just something for you to mull over as you scroll through your heavily algorithm-curated feeds today.
A chilling but absolutely necessary question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We love taking these surreal, dense concepts and unpacking them with you. Stay curious, keep questioning the shadows on your walls, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.